Well, you've seen the news, and so have I. Zohran Mamdani, the 33-year-old New York State Assemblyman who calls himself a democratic socialist, is the front runner to become the mayor of New York City. And his candidacy has raised lots of questions, and all kinds of terms are swirling around, like Marxism and communism and socialism and capitalism. So in this message, I want to define where those terms came from, what they mean, and I want us to draw some practical conclusions for you and for me. So let's look at these terms, these ideologies, and how they apply to our present-day world. Ideas have consequences, and consequences shape events, history, and culture. And so it's important for us to understand these terms because there's been an enormous shift in our culture in the last 50 to 75 years. Americans are deeply divided on which way to turn. In 2019, 43% of Americans said socialism is good for our country. 56% said socialism is bad for our country, and only 6% had no opinion at all. So our country is deeply divided. 36% of the baby boomers, 44% of the Gen X, 70% of the millennials, and 65% of the Gen Zs believe that they would vote or are extremely likely to vote for a socialist in the near future. The YouGovernment poll of those between 16 and 29 says that 44% prefer to live in a socialist nation rather than a capitalistic nation. Yet only 33% of these people could define what socialism really is. And that's what I want to do. I want to talk about what these terms mean. The rise of socialism, or social democracy, is deeply embedded in our current day educational and political systems. So it's important we understand the distinctions. What is Marxism? What is communism? What is socialism? What is capitalism? And I want to define those for you in real practical terms. Are you ready? Here we go. Let's start with Marxism, because that's where everything begins. Marxism is a set of ideas from Karl Marx, a philosopher in the late 1800s. He said that society is split into two groups: the workers who make stuff and the owners who control stuff, money and businesses. The proletariat, the working class, and the bourgeoisie, the owner class, who own the production and all of the money. Now, Marx said this is really unfair. The owners get rich while the workers stay poor. In fact, they get poorer and poorer, which leads to a conflict, which comes from the unequal distribution of wealth and power. And this leads to what he called a class struggle between the working class and the owner class. And the solution to the struggle is for the working class to revolt and overthrow the owner class so that everyone works and shares everything equally. The essence of history, he said, is this struggle between the rich and the poor. The teachings of Marx inspired the Russian Revolution in 1917, where the workers took over and started the Soviet Union. They used Marx's ideas to build a system where everyone shared all of the resources. You see, Marx said capitalism will eventually fall. It will fail because workers get fed up. But when countries tried Marxism, it led to a strong government control, took away personal freedom from the people, and ended up in a bad economic system. The reason was because Marx never spelled out a clear plan for how to make his ideas work. And so it opened the door for people like Lenin to come in, who added his own rules to the teaching of Marx and led to a strict, controlled government which controlled the people, which led to a great famine. The same thing happened in China. China tried Marxism in the 1960s under Mao's The Great Leap Forward, which only led to a great famine where millions of people died in hunger. That's Marxism. Let's share everything. No one owns anything. We are all equal. So that's Marxism. Everyone shares everything equally. There is no owner class. There is no working class. There is only one class. Now, this led to communism. Communism is a spin-off of Marxism. There's no private property. Everyone shares everything equally. People work for the community. Everyone gets what they need food, homes, goods. It's a world with no rich and no poor. The key idea is no one owns anything. It's all for the group. Everything and everyone works and shares together. Sounds very, very similar to Marxism. In the late 1900s, the Soviet Union tried communism as well. The government owned everything. The people worked for the state. They built schools, farms, factories. But over time, the people didn't always agree on how to share. So to keep everyone in line, the government oppressed the people. It took away their personal freedoms. Well, by 1988, I experienced the actual communist society and ideology in the GDR, the German Democratic Republic. I wanted to go and study Martin Luther, so I was able to get, after 6 months, a visa to go in and study. Very, very, very tightly controlled. I was met by the Stasi, the state government, the Ministry for State Security at the borderline. They sat in my train car in a seat facing me for over a half an hour, just looking at me, rifling through everything I had, taking away all newspapers, magazines, Bibles, anything I had that was personal before they would allow me into their country. When I got there, the stores were closed. There was no paint on the buildings. The color was all gone. I found one little store where there was one egg on a shelf. And the intelligence of the secret police was overwhelming. They controlled the people. This was a repressive, marginalized, voiceless society under communism. The currency, the Ostmark, the Eastmark, was absolutely worthless. People turned informant on each other so that they could get things from the government. You would lose your job, there would be psychological harassment, social shame, a loss of human freedom. How do you get things in that kind of environment? The more you inform, the better life you live, and the more things that you have. Every person had a file in Berlin. Even to this day, when we take our Luther tours to East Germany, the people are still afraid to speak or declare their beliefs. It's very hard for churches to function. People don't want to join things. They're paranoid. They were broken apart because the culture of their society didn't work, and they don't know how to trust anyone anymore. Cuba tried communism, but the people left that country as best as they could because of the lack of food and energy. The shortages were awful, the strict rules. When the government controls too much, it gets hard to have personal freedom. Venezuela has the same problem. The government took over the oil, the energy, the farms. This has led to wide-scale energy and food shortages. By 2019, the socialist policies led to 80% of the people living in poverty in Venezuela. It shows how tough it is to make it under a communist system. People can't choose. They lose their jobs. They lose their ability to speak freely. The government wants to control everything. Communism seems like Marxism, doesn't it? It's hard to make the distinctions. Yeah, because it really is a spin-off of Marxism. Then there's socialism. Socialism is a spin-off of communism, where the government or the community are the owners of the factories, the farms, the hospitals, the stores. They make sure everyone gets a fair share of the food, healthcare, education. People can still own personal things like bikes or clothes, but the group decides how everything is run. It decides what is important. It decides how to share things with people. The goal is to reduce the gap between the rich and the poor so that everyone works together, and the government helps spread the resources. No one's left out. And this sounds really good. Sweden has tried socialism, democratic socialism. They have some socialist ideas. They pay for free health care and schools, and people own businesses and homes. It's a democratic socialism. Socialist ideas with the freedom to own certain possessions. It sounds good, but Sweden is a small country with high taxes. You know, the taxes go up to over 50%. And they don't have to fund a military or take care of 340 million people like the United States does. But they've tried socialism. Most countries that have tried it have failed in their attempt, which is why that leads us to capitalism, where people are the owners of the shops, the houses, the factories. The people make money by selling things or working. The government stays out of business decisions. People compete to make the best products. They can earn money. people have a high level of freedom to make their own choice. The key idea is you keep what you earn. Competition drives new ideas, new products, new businesses, new stores. In the United States, people can start companies from small lemonade stands to Apple or Amazon, and they get to keep their profits. The government sets some rules, safety laws, safety standards, but doesn't run the businesses. Capitalism encourages innovation, entrepreneurs. We get new phones and new games. The problem, people say, is that capitalism creates a big gap between the rich and the poor. Some earn more than others. In the United States, the top 1% of the people own about 30% of the wealth of our country. Capitalism gives everyone a chance to work hard and succeed, and some of those earn far, far more than others. It does create a gap. Having said that, America is capitalism with some socialist ideas, like Social Security or public schools that help everyone. But it focuses on private ownership and competition while still providing for certain things for the public good. Now, admittedly, that brings problems which our culture faces today between the rich and the poor. So people can get marginalized or disenfranchised in a capitalistic system, just the same as in Marxism, communism, and socialism. People can be devalued, and we have to work very hard at making sure that doesn't happen. Now, let me close by saying this. What is fundamentally wrong with Marxism, communism, and socialism? Let me share a couple things that I think are at the core of these ideologies and belief systems. One, all of these systems reject a belief in God, the God of the Bible. So when you reject a belief in God, you're rejecting a belief in absolutes. Now that's bad news. It's heresy to the socialists to say that there are absolutes. It's heresy to say we're created in the image of God and therefore we ought to be treated like valuable human beings. To Marx, work is God. Christianity, or a belief system, or faith, is what he called the opiate of the people. You've probably heard that term. Christianity, or a faith system, or a belief in God, puts people to sleep. There's no room for a God in a Marxist system. His system is a godless society. Religion is the opiate of the people. It's used by the ruling class to put the working class asleep. It causes them to be dull and numb to their pain. Think about slavery, that period in American history. Marx would say, well, we encouraged slaves to have religion. We built churches for them so that they would find the reward not in this life, but in the future. And they get that reward in the future based on their present obedience. So they would say, when I die, I'll go to heaven, and then God will reward me, but I won't find it in this life. The ruling class invented religion to maintain power over the working class. They want to get rid of organized religion. So Marx had this lifelong commitment to atheism, and not only to atheism, but to persecute religion and those who believed in a God. Religion was replaced by a new consciousness in the working class coming together with the owning class. Marx never deserted his hatred for Judaism and Christianity. Those two groups are persecuted in a Marxist system. A natural, inseparable part of his belief and the communist belief and most socialists is that God has to go. And there's a second problem. Marx, communism, socialism reject the doctrine of the fall of humanity, of people. They believe, coming from Hegel, every day and every way the world is getting better and better, that we're created basically good. And we will naturally, instinctively work for each other and care for each other and provide for each other. We'll provide everything that another person needs. We're basically good people. Unfortunately, we're not good at heart. That's not what the Bible teaches. All have sinned. All have fallen short of the glory of God. Marxism and communism and socialism disregard basic human nature and assume that people will work hard for the group without wanting anything extra for themselves. But in reality, in the old Soviet Union, in China, Cuba, Venezuela, People don't work as hard because they don't get any profit from the hard work that they put in. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 because it couldn't produce enough goods. China moved away from strict communism because the Great Leap Forward caused the Great Famine that hurt millions and millions and millions of people. So these terms are used about Mr. Mamdani. What is Marxism, communism, socialism, capitalism? Ultimately, a position like Mr. Mamdani's tends to lead towards some sort of socialism or communism. In fact, I would venture to say that socialism always leads to communism, and communism always leads to Marxism, and Marxism always leads to a clampdown, a punishment of human freedom and faith. And the other problem is with free this and free that is that at some point, someone has to pay the bills. Who pays the bills? The Great Leap Forward ultimately caused vast poverty in China. You see, the problem is that nothing's for free, and we don't work for free. At some point, someone has to pay the bills. And the question becomes, who is it? Who pays the bills? So these terms are used about Mr. Mamdani. They're used because socialism ultimately leads to communism, and communism ultimately leads to Marxism. That's been the story of history. They lead to some sort of clampdown and oppression of human freedom. And more importantly, all of this would be fine if there was no God, but there is. And all of this would be fine if people were born basically good, but they're not. Ultimately, historically, these systems lead to condemning human freedom, human choice, and human faith, and especially to the Jewish people and the Christian people and the values of Western civilization. So be wise. Be wise. Mr. Mamdani, we've seen this before. Who pays the bills for the free groceries? Who makes the decisions? The people or you? And what about my belief system? Is it okay? Or do you condemn me? Which is it? I'd like to know.